All right, Josh, have you ever met a person named Map before?
No.
So I met a person named Map,
Okay.
and I feel like you'd like to hear the details of how I met said Map, right?
Yeah.
So we get invited to a show, Weezer, no big deal,
Yeah.
here at the local arena, and we get box seat for like in the suite. Also not a big deal, Josh. But so it's gonna be like an intimate setting. We're gonna meet some people, but you don't know everybody in the suite, right?
Yeah.
It is we do the whole show. It's amazing. Haven't seen Weezer in 20 years. And we're leaving, and my wife Libby goes, "Man, it's a pretty good show. That's like especially for like a random Tuesday night, like who knew like we're going to Weezer on a Tuesday night?" And I said, "Yeah, it was a good show." And I said, "By the way, you don't meet a lot of maps." And she goes, "What?" And I go, "The guy we hung out with, Map." And she goes, "What are you talking about?" So now let's fast forward or rewind to when I
Oh.
met Map, okay? So super loud, opening band comes in and says, "Hey, this is Matt." I go, "Hey, Matt, nice to meet you. I'm Dan." He goes, "No, no, no, it's not Matt. Matt with a P." And I go, "Oh, Map." And he just kind of looks at me weird. So then later, my friend Dave comes in. "Hey, Dave, this is Map." Yeah, but with a P. And I'm like, "Dude, I pronounced the P. Like, did you not hear me
Oh,
pronounce the P? I'm pronouncing it so hard." And so
Matt.
then again, I'm like, "Hey, Matt, like, you want a beer?" And he's like, "No, no, no, with a P." And I'm like, "I am pronouncing the P so hard." Libby goes, "His name is Pat."
Oh my gosh.
So,
Holy
we
shit.
literally laughed so hard in the car,
Oh
almost had an
wow.
accident. We were,
That
like,
is good.
crying laughing,
That is good.
and then she says, "Where's your headspace that when he says, 'No, Matt with a P,' you go to Map, not Pat?"
No, no alarms going off at all. That the P goes in the end and he's Map.
So I felt really bad. So,
Wow. Little tunnel
Pat
vision.
slash Map, if you're out there, I really apologize. Great dude, fun to hang out with.
Yeah. Good
Just
Tuesday night.
I hope he can understand what he was dealing with because
Yeah.
it wasn't a full deck of cards. Yeah.
Long
So
day, auditory interference.
yeah. So Libby's
That's
now
great.
told every person she knows, and
Well,
people now just call me Map when they see me.
I think
Which
all the maps will probably be reaching out too.
yeah.
They're they're trying offended.
The funny, we live in Colorado. It just for me just wasn't a big stretch.
Yeah.
I
A
mean,
lot
hey,
of hikers
a
and
lot of hikers. There's
backpackers, like
14.
parents
There's
for backpackers,
yeah,
and they love maps.
they love maps, right?
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
mean, who doesn't like a good map?
I love a good map.
Yeah.
I
So
just wouldn't think human name,
yeah,
but you
that's
did. You did.
that's what I got for you.
That's good.
So
Well, I'm glad you're able to laugh about it.
I'm sure there's a pretty good parent lesson in there, something about like being present or
Everyone does
not
dumb things.
rushing to judgment.
Everyone does
There
things.
we go.
So you got to be able to have humility, embrace it.
I'll take that.
We
I'll
make
take
mistakes.
yeah.
I called this guy the wrong name all night. And even at the end, I was still calling the wrong name till your mom told me.
Oh, it was bad. It was bad.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, hey, let's talk about some pretty good parent things.
Yeah. What's our topic today, Joshua?
Um, Parenting out of guilt.
Mm.
The impact of it, how to know if you're doing it, the different scenarios that we find ourselves in, and how to make a better decision and what to prioritize when you're in that situation. So we do what, why, how.
Yeah.
What? Well, when you're the driver of your parenting is your own guilt. That's the what.
Um and then the
The why.
yeah, I think the why is interesting because why parents would do that. There's probably a lot of reasons why parents would drive with guilt.
Well, the source of guilt when so we'll do some stereotypical like parenting guilty situations, but let's say you travel for work, you're not around the kids as much as you'd like, you feel bad, and you feel like you have to make up for it. Um, and so it's spoiling them either by giving them things or not enforcing or holding boundaries or expectations. Um, Another example would be if one of your children requires more attention. So let's say one of them has a disability, or one of them they've traveled for sports, or they require a lot more. Um, it's easy for guilt to creep in and influence the parenting of the other child that you feel bad for or that you feel bad about. And failing to calculate, is this what's really good for the child? We're trying to just alleviate our own guilt by doing that thing for them. And that's really what guilt leads to, just as like human behavior is we fail to calculate the ideal outcome. We're just trying to like alleviate the pressure of guilt and get away from it.
Mhm.
And we're less concerned about how it lands or what it reinforces. We're more just like, I just am tired of this guilty feeling. Can I just say this or do this or buy this or get out from under this tension and feel better? And as parents, we are constantly influencing, teaching, and grooming kids to have worldviews. And you could spoil them really just because you feel guilty over something, and instead of come to peace with it and have a conversation about it.
Yeah.
So the how, I guess, well, with more of the why, I think it's likely to teach entitlement, or said differently, it's likely to make spoiled kids, because they have learned that they do get what they want. They might not know that the parent feels guilty. They just know that they get what they want from this parent. Um, and then as a result, they don't learn limitations. They don't hear the word no very often. They have a hard time hearing no, and they get upset. Those are what brats or spoiled kids or entitled kids look like.
Mhm.
Versus saying, I'm sorry that I can't take you to this thing. I want you to have fun, but I can't go. I can't take you. I have to go to work, or I made this commitment. Parents that feel like they feel bad for prioritizing themselves, can teach the kid that once you're a parent, you don't take care of yourself. It's all about the kid.
Mhm.
And then you just spoil this kid, and they don't see mom and dad having a balanced life of like friends and activities or solo time or time away with your partner. They just see moms and dads like bending over backwards for the kids, failing to calculate like, does this land well? What are they walking away with thinking like life's about, or how to parent? So it's not. I'm not saying self-sacrificing parents are parenting out of guilt, and I'm also not saying every kid is entitled when parents make sacrifices or gives them a gift or takes them to Disneyland because they feel bad. It's like a lot of other things. It's the repetitive patterns that we're concerned about, the over and over again of didn't do what you felt like you should have done, feel bad about it, and you overcompensate by doing this thing that you wouldn't do otherwise for your
Mhm.
child. And then they come to expect that as the new norm.
And I feel like there's probably a balance from this generation and the last generation, right? So, um, as far as that, working and like work hours and like now we're in an economy where a lot of people can work from home and may have more time with their kids where previous, maybe they had to travel, be on the road. Like for example, when I was growing up, my dad would be gone for 20 days of the month, and home for just a week, right?
Mm,
And so it was a huge strain, like, and I totally could see that then, of wow, I've been gone the entire month and now I got this week and so that was a very noticeable difference, right?
yeah.
Of like probably, and I'm sure there was probably some guilt there. And um, yeah, and I think probably every parent has a bit of this guilt, probably just on a sliding scale, right? Of
I think so, but
false promises, and or like you said, I feel like I should be doing this, but I'm not.
yeah. Well, there's definitely been a generational shift from, let's say, one or two generations ago where there was a lot less concern about how kids were feeling, and the real world was given more, I don't know, had more credibility versus your kids are supposed to feel good. And so parents have overcompensated, creating non confident, insecure, pampered kids that don't trust themselves and don't handle adversity very well because parents stepped in and talked to the teacher for them, called the principal and complained. Um, did these things for their child. And I say for in quotations, like, is this really helpful?
Mhm.
Because the world isn't always that concerned about how you feel, and our ability to handle adversity and tough days or the word no is very important to being a healthy human. But the younger generations have a lot of softer parents, and a lot of soft parenting has led to, you'd say, coddled kids, pampered, entitled kids that are struggling when they go off to college to be able to like make their own independent decisions and feel confident because mom and dad did so much for them.
Mhm.
Um, it's a little bit of a soapbox from my vantage point of you're hurting your kids by doing this thing you think is helpful, and they don't need that level of help. They actually would benefit from being on their own. An example of this might sound a little extreme to some parents, but it's kind of the point. Um, my daughter, when she was in kindergarten, this she was fascinated with school buses, and she was so excited that she was finally get to ride a school bus. And the bus would come to our neighborhood and pick her up. The bus stop though was like around the corner in a non-visible place from our house. And she had been a fairly cautious child up until this point. And I wanted her to be tougher and I wanted her to be more courageous, because I felt like she'd live a better life if she trusted herself and could overcome adversity and challenges. So when she said she wanted to go to the bus stop by herself, on the first day of school, what you couldn't see, it was a big test to my
Mhm.
parenting philosophy of letting your kids succeed or fail on their own and let them learn their life lessons. Because one of the thoughts that came in my head is she could get kidnapped from this bus stop and I wouldn't know about it for like 3, 4 hours once the school called and said, your daughter is absent.
Right.
And so this kidnapper had already like, gone to Wyoming with our daughter. She wasn't kidnapped. It was a perfectly safe, fine bus stop experience, and she absolutely loved it.
Did you guys not watch her, like,
We
hide
didn't,
behind
like, literally
Oh, there's
did
no chance we woulda done that.
I
We woulda
chose to not parent out of fear.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying anyone needs to do this level of like
Right.
parenting, but I didn't want to give in to my fear when I knew this is a really safe neighborhood in a very safe town. And there are other kids at the bus stop. She's not standing in some like metropolitan area in some random street, looking suspicious. There are going to be a few other kids there. I didn't want her to think that we didn't trust her or that she should be fearful of the neighborhood or the bus stop.
Mhm.
And kids are impressionable. And so I didn't want to address my fear. I didn't want to prioritize my fear. I wanted to prioritize the accomplishment and the victory that comes from her addressing and experiencing her own independence. And so that's an example of what's really best for your child versus what's your own emotional trigger point that you're trying to solve for.
Right.
Um, like when I don't think about when we were kids, I don't remember a lot of parents picking kids up from school. There was a lot of walking and biking
Mhm.
and some buses. And then I think the occasional drop off. But now it seems like it's predominant
Oh, it's a
picking up
massive line
huge
outside.
lines. They
Yeah.
design the schools now with these huge pickup lines,
Yeah.
right? And I think it's a perfect example of now they do have more sports. They are have more events after school. I'll give you that. Which is another problem in some ways. But it's robbing kids of this amazing independence. When I was in elementary school, we literally would walk like 2 miles. I think it was longer than 2 miles, actually. And this isn't like the old guy saying he walked 2 ways
Mhm.
uphill. It was uh it was a long walk or bike ride, no cell phones,
Mhm.
no idea where we were going. Like we could have stopped at a friend's house. And it was like the world is your oyster. The school is out, you grab your backpack and you walk home or ride your bike, and it was meandering through multiple neighborhoods. Um, my parents were not afraid. And and I didn't feel that I should be afraid because they didn't act weird. And I got to experience that amazing sense of adventure and independence, and confidence that I must be okay because my parents were letting me do this. Guilt is a similar kind of dynamic of we feel like we want to give them something or provide, or we want to be available for them, and we can't, and so we need to make up for it. But the premise behind that is they we think they deserve it, and I would say no, they don't. They just need to know you love them, and that sometimes you can't be there, or sometimes life doesn't go the way you want. You want them to be prepared for like real life, and real life is not everyone else or very few people are going to like put them at the center of their world. And so as a parent to be thinking, I want them to be able to like deal with disappointment. So I missed the soccer game the other day. I don't want to miss soccer games, but I'm going to miss soccer games sometimes. And I want my daughter in this case to know it bums me out to miss your game. I love watching you. And I'm going to work hard to make as many as I can, but I'll miss some. And I just want you to know it has nothing to do with my support for you or my enjoyment of you. Um, and that's it. Versus, making up for it by doing something weird. Like it's not weird to say I'm going to take you out for ice cream. What would be weird is, well, I feel bad I missed your soccer game, so I'm going to say yes to anything you ask, or I'm going to
Mhm.
go indulge you in this like material thing. So maybe fill in the gap that you feel, you don't feel loved by me or something. She just needs to know I love her and I had a good reason, and it's not a habit I want to make. And I think that is a real, a good life lesson for her to know that my life doesn't revolve around her. She has a major part in my life, and I consider a lot of things I do with her and my son in mind. But I don't think it's healthy for any human to feel like another human's whole life is like revolving around them. It's like too much pressure and it's weird
Yeah.
for them to think that way. And what's in some cases worse is it teaches it and it just like gets passed down. We do make a ton of sacrifice and consideration for our kids, obviously, and even more when they're younger. But it's really good for them to know that we believe that they can handle things on their own. And if we made a mistake or we didn't get to do this thing, just tell them, I'm really sorry. That bums me out. I will not make a habit of that, but it's going to happen from time to time. And I just want you to know it has nothing to do with how I care about you. Now, if you never went to the games, that's a different story. If you haven't been supportive at all, you don't just get to say that and it won't have the same clout. But you
Mhm.
do make an effort, you do adjust the work schedule, you do try to compensate in some other ways. You just don't want guilt to be the driver. Conviction is a representation of intent. It's a follow up of our intent. Like, I want to be an involved parent, I want them to feel supported. And I'm missing too many things. The conviction is just another way of saying, and when I evaluate my intentions, if I'm failing, I need to adjust it. Guilt isn't usually as objective. Okay. These words aren't perfect. And so they can be twisted a little bit, but guilt is a more subjective, sometimes imagined or exaggerated response, where a conviction would be, I said I was going to be a supportive parent and I haven't done the supportive things. I need to address that. I need to own that and talk to my son, talk to my daughter, make some changes. Guilt is, I feel like I should be at every game and I had to miss one. So now I
Mhm.
got to make sure they don't feel bad. And I'm just going to let them stay up late or do whatever this weekend. You're like, that's not what's good for them. It's okay for them to hear, I was bummed I missed your game and I'm going to try to like do a better job next time, but I'm going to miss some, because that's my working world. That's my life. But you're a huge part of it, and I'd love to hear about it. What were the highlights from the game? So there is some response that we want to take, but it should be rooted more in conviction than guilt. Guilt gets just really wonky in terms of like what we
Mhm.
might we're reacting to. I hear this from a lot of parents. Well, I always saw my mom, I always saw my dad do this, and I'm not doing that, so I feel really bad. And I'm like, well, is that what you want to do? Well, no. Okay, then why do you feel bad? Well, I just do. That's the example they set. I'm like, well, let's just set the example you want for yourself and maybe break this trend that you're modeling to your kids what a balanced parent looks like. They have a personal life. They have a partner likely and good friends and activities that they take care of themselves. That's what you want them to see. You don't want them to see that they didn't do anything for themselves. It was all about you, because that's what they're going to repeat as the adult, right? You got to like think they're going to do a lot of things that you're doing. We talk about this all the time. What are you modeling?
Right.
Live the life that you would want them to live. You'd want them to have friends at 20 and 30 and 40. And when they have kids, you want them to have good supportive friends and they go on vacations. Not all be about every kid's event or every kid's emotion. It's just not necessary for their development.
Yeah, and I would say one of the biggest pitfalls that I've seen that's well, maybe I experienced it growing up and maybe probably fall into it myself, but when I feel guilty, is to instantly feel like I can bail out with like a promise and then setting up like an unfulfilled
Unattainable.
yeah,
Yeah.
like yeah, exactly, like unattainable promise. To me, it's just like one of the worst things you can ever do, right?
Yeah.
It's just so like, and then your kid just feels, oh really? Like, oh that's great. Like, oh you're gonna get me a pony? Oh cool. You know, I mean,
The pony.
I know that's a little
Yeah.
drastic, but you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
right. It's like, oh, I'm sorry I did that. Let me get you a
Well,
pony.
like buying material goods
Right.
or being the Disneyland parent.
Uh-huh.
Um, Nothing at all against like going to Disneyland or buying gifts.
Right.
It's out of guilt that it can start to get imbalanced.
Mhm.
And you're right, it sends this message. It's not the quality, it's the quantity, or it's the material thing. It's not the sentiment. I was bummed I missed your thing.
Mhm.
I don't want to miss those things. I don't want you to think I missed it because I don't care about you. I had this thing pop up, or I had this really fun guys event that's really important to me, right? So that's exactly, we got WGA coming up this weekend, and I'm gonna miss my daughter's soccer games on Friday and Saturday. And I stressed the other day, it's gonna be 2 weekends in a row where my activities prevent me from going to your games, and I don't
Mhm.
want you to think I don't care. These events were planned months ago. One was a festival, I didn't get to pick the date, and the other one was an event, I also didn't pick the date.
Right.
And I'm bummed to miss them. I love watching you play. I just didn't want you to think I didn't notice, I didn't care. But I am doing things that are good for me, and it's going to be fun. And not a but. And I'm sad to miss seeing your games, and I want you to know that matters to me.
Mhm.
And my daughter's like, "Oh, yeah, I don't, whatever. I know,
Right.
Dad. I want you to have fun." So she gets it, and she understands that I do prioritize both. I do prioritize being there for her and her brother, and I do a great job of like having fun and taking care of myself, which being good parents, we need to be balanced. We've got to go
Mm.
fill up. Sometimes, especially the younger our kids, we've got to go fill up more often. And we fill up usually with friends or alone time or with our partner.
Mhm.
Going back to that self-care topic that we had, a few months ago.
Taking care of all numero uno, Josh.
There it is.
There
There
it
it is.
is. That's what
The most quoted line
if there's anything you get out of this, pretty good parents, you
comes
gotta
back
take
once
care of
again
old numero
back
uno.
to
All
numero
right. So
uno.
what about the parents who there was a couple examples I think you gave. So one maybe let's say family has a kids with special needs, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of time there and or maybe I think another one that I've seen happen too is like sports and it's starting to creep in our family where the boys are older, their sports are taking them a lot of different places. And now it's like a real choice we have to make. But I think the special needs one is a little more important because it's like that could obviously just be, a lot of
There's not a
management time.
choice,
There's no
right?
choice,
You
right?
have to do
And
that.
so, yeah, what does a parent do to balance the different kids
Yeah,
in those
it's a really
situations?
important example. Um, you have to first you start with acknowledging and accepting that the quantity is always it's never going to be the same. You can't make it equal. Um, Thankfully, you don't need to. But in order for that to be compensated, you have to be really intentional with what time you do spend with the other child or the other children. And you have to be really communicative about the imbalance. So, for example, And, I'll do the stereotypical scenario and talk about why it's negative, and then we'll talk about the ideal, okay? So the stereotypical scenario is you feel really bad that your one child gets 75% of your energy and your time and your resources, and then you feel really bad that the other kid gets neglected, and so you just give them lots of things. You let them do things you wouldn't otherwise let them do. You bend the rules, you adjust the rules. You're just like, yeah, but they don't get a lot of this. There are times where bending the rules make the most sense, but repeated over and over again, that's going to be their expectation. Um, when my parents are away from me, they usually come back with lots of gifts, and so they come to like expect that that's the trade off. Versus acknowledging we know that you're not getting the time that you want or that we want, and we know that that's not fair to you, and we're going to continually work hard at connecting in the ways that we can. But you wouldn't say this to the kid as much as you would say to yourself. It's just never going to be equal. And I think saying to the kid, it probably never feels like it's equal. And I want you to know that you're not wrong. Your brother or your sister's needs can be so intense sometimes that we just don't have a choice, and we know that that's not fair for you, and that hurts our feelings, but we trust that this experience is going to be okay because we're going to continue to be there for you and do our best that we can. And we also know that you're going to be the best sibling you can be, and over the years that we're going to be able to figure this out. You can't just like fix it with like swooping in and like giving them a big thing.
Mhm.
They don't when they're younger, it's like a nice like hit of dopamine where they get this like big treat, this big gift and or these big trips. But it doesn't really set them up to deal with the reality of life. And sometimes you don't get the attention you want, and it's no one's fault. It's not the parent's fault that that kid doesn't get that time. It's just the way that family is. And the
Mhm.
sooner the kid can accept that, the better off they're going to be. So the key is to say it's not fair and it has nothing to do with you. We don't have an option sometimes, and that bums all of us out. But that's the right thing to do as a parent. We've got to make sure your brother or your sister gets the care that they need. And we will work really hard to make sure you get the attention that you deserve and need when we can. And let's continue to talk about it. Let's see how it's going. We can make some tweaks. We can make some special kinds of trips or time or quality time. It's the intentionality that they need more than anything else. I'm not saying quantity or quality don't matter. They do, but intentionality can go a long ways by saying, this is not fair. This has nothing to do with who you are. This is our situation and makes it really complicated for us to be able to balance it out all the time. And we're committed to making sure your needs continue to get met.
And then would that be the same too for the traveling parent to just sort of acknowledge and explain that? So, like, let's say someone has a really crazy job, right?
Exactly. It's a let's do stereotypical. Okay, it's not always the case, but dad travels all the time, and dad feels really guilty. What should dad do? Well, one, optimize whatever time he can to connect with the kids.
Mhm.
But on the road, it's intentional text messages, FaceTime calls, phone calls. How's your day? I thought of you today. Send a funny picture, send an emoji. Um, look forward to our next time together. What about, can we be thinking of restaurants that we can go to? You're not bribing, you're casting vision of what the relationship means to you and what you could be doing together. And you say, I want you to know that I'm fully aware that my job takes me away from you more than either one of us want that. And it's a tough decision, but given the circumstances right now, I feel like I need to stay at this job. But I want you to know it has nothing to do with me not wanting to be around you. And I do acknowledge that it might hurt us and hurt you from time to time. That's why I want to make sure we can continue to talk about it and not let that resentment build.
Mhm.
Because sometimes you have no choice, like your
Right.
dad's job or jobs that are like overtly or travel oriented. Um, you don't want to come home and just like shower them with gifts. Get them a gift or a few gifts. the point isn't no gifts. It's don't try to like compensate the missed time with a gift. Intentional words will be way more impacting in how they feel and how they see the relationship. To
Mhm.
hear dad say in this case, you mean a lot to me and you mean more than my time can show it sometimes. And I just want you to know it's not you and it's not ideal, but given the circumstances, I feel like I need to do it. We just need to make the most of what time we do have.
Mhm. Yeah, it's funny, I feel like one of the first times we traveled away, I was like, "Oh, should we get the kids gifts?" And Libby's like, "Why do we need to give them gifts?" Like, maybe we're also cheap and it's a little bit of a hassle. But, yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's something to that, right? It's like, what is that really saying sometimes? I'm not saying it's, like, bad to give gifts and be this nice and thoughtful and be like, "Hey, I was thinking about you and
Yeah.
thought you might like this. Is something cool that you're into." But just like, I don't know. This is just I'm not talking crap about anybody, but, like, cause I used to travel a lot for work, and I always thought about that, like, I'm running the airport and see some random trinket, right? And I'm
Yeah.
like, "Do I need to get this random trinket for my kids to just"
Well, it's usually shit.
Yeah,
It's not even
and I
like a
feel like
cool
those
trinket.
for me
It's
were guilt purchases
yeah,
versus, for my kids, like, they're in golf, if I go to Augusta or something, be like, "Oh, like, I would get them
yeah,
something, right? But, like, versus just I'm in, like, some random airport and give 'em a random trinket, and they're like, "Oh, whatever, dad,"
yeah.
so
You grabbed it on your run to the gate,
yeah.
you know. And I'm not saying don't buy your kids gifts or there's no one's wrong for getting
Mhm.
gifts when you go on vacation. It's is guilt driving it, and I would say it's just not a healthy pattern in any of us.
Right.
That's all. It's not guaranteed to mess up your kid or something, but it's like an unnecessary burden that the parent suffers from. And this might guilt you now, parent. Your child is at risk of adopting the same behavior and repeating. So again, you'd say, what do you want your kids to do when they're parenting and how they live? Do you want them to be feeling the same kind of like weird guilt? Or do you want them to say, hey, my kids know that I love them and that I'm having a good time with,
Mhm.
their mom or my friends? That's it. Like that's the way a healthy dad lives.
Mhm.
I did get them this gift because it made me think of them and I thought they'd like it. Or I didn't because it was just a bunch of shit at the airport and the place I was staying didn't have cool gifts. So I didn't get you anything.
Mhm.
Um, it doesn't matter if you're able to talk to your kids and let them know how you feel about them and you back that up most of the time or consistently, it's not going to be a problem. It's when the parents don't talk about it and they're afraid that talking about it might make it worse. Like I hear this a lot, like this philosophy that somehow talking about it might make it a thing or a bigger thing. It's usually the exact opposite. Not talking about it is likely to build more in that kid's head, and then they don't get resolution because they don't hear an alternative point of view versus saying, "I don't know how you feel, but I'm wondering if you're feeling that you're not important to me because I always work and I miss a lot of your things." Is that something that you have felt, yes or no? And I want you to know that it's hard on me to miss your stuff.
Mhm.
And it's not an easy decision. And that's why when we are together, it's so important that we do connect and that I'm as present as I can be. So the intentional conversation can compensate a lot of the time for whatever you're missing on, whether it's like time away or yeah, miss an event or didn't handle something well. Just going and saying you're sorry for like a mistake is healthier than coming in with a bunch of guilt and like trying to just make them feel good.
Mhm.
Like that's not helpful for them. It'd be helpful to learn what happened and how to reconcile that versus just eliminate their discomfort. And that's why I don't believe in guilt as a constructive behavior because it's not really doesn't have a target in mind.
Mhm.
It's just like trying to eliminate an uncomfortable feeling versus what are you trying to solve for? If it's reconciliation or if it's letting them know your intent and how you missed the mark and it's an apology or it's a forgiveness, that's not guilt. Guilt is usually just this like really subjective, odd behavior that a lot of people live like their whole life. Like, well, I just feel guilty. and then they do all these weird things in response to their guilt, and parents are, fall into the same trap.
Yeah. I always feel like there's that stereotype for me that plays in my head of, that kind of workaholic traveling dad who's like never there for his kids, and then something happens in school and they're like, "Oh, that's a bunch of BS. They'd ever do that. I'm going to call the principal right now," and like try to bail somebody out
Then
of
he swoops
some
in.
swoops in to do this, thing, and you're
Yeah.
like, But what is that teaching, right? Like what is,
Yeah.
like you don't just get things like in life automatically fixed
No.
for you or what, you know what I mean?
You're gonna have
So,
a boss that says mean things to you or doesn't give you what you think, or you have a difficult coworker. You don't have a parent that can swoop in and solve your problems. You have to learn those skills early.
mhm,
And trying to this goes back to like the enabling, coddling parenting. You're robbing them of the opportunity to learn how to navigate life. Now, that doesn't mean you throw them to the wolves, but facilitating their learning experiences by letting them handle or face a little bit more than the last time, so it builds, will challenge the parent's like emotional state, like you had kind of alluded to. You couldn't imagine letting a kid walk to the bus stop that you couldn't see,
mhm,
recognizing that your need for assurance or control isn't maybe necessary, isn't a benefit to the kid. And I'm not saying everyone should do what I did, but acknowledging early on, I don't want to parent out of fear,
mhm,
because the truth is there are a million or a billion things that could go wrong with my kid in their day, and I'm not going to be able to prevent it. I don't want to start calculating all the things that could go wrong and live that way because it's endless. It
mhm,
takes over versus like what's reasonable. What's reasonable is we lived in a safe neighborhood in a safe town with other kids, and and it wasn't reasonable to think they were going to get kidnapped. And I want her to feel courageous and proud and enjoy that experience and trust herself. And so I made myself stay on the deck versus walking down the steps, walking around the corner and peeking over there and see how she's doing. Because I really wanted to also push myself to say, if you don't want to parent out of fear, then do it right now.
mhm.
Practice that.
Well, we had an episode about talking about setting intentions as a parent, right? Like what intentions do you want? Uh, so would it be safe to say that if you're dealing with guilt, as long as you stick to the way you intend to parent, it's probably fine. And if you go outside that, then it's probably not doing the right thing.
Yes, I would say, yeah,
Like you know what I mean? So like I think you can still shower your kids with gifts or take them out for ice cream or be nice to them because you miss them and like you're on a
absolutely.
long work trip and you want to hang out with them and like there's no harm in that. But I think it's like there's that fine line of the intentionality of how you want to be a parent versus like going outside that to soothe your own guilt,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. It's similar to the bribing that we
Yeah.
talked about a few weeks ago.
Mhm.
That's really about us trying to like manage our own discomfort by managing their behavior and their mood, without really calculating what's best for them. Like they need to be able to handle orders or instructions or boundaries or the word no.
Mhm.
If we don't facilitate that learning, they don't learn it. They become little, Tasmanian devils
Yeah.
or shitheads when they're older because they got everything they wanted, or and then people don't cater to them and they don't know what to do. Acknowledging, like, is this my storm I'm trying to compensate for, or is this really what's good for them? And what you just said is, if my intent of how I want to parent is my driver, it's my target, whatever I'm feeling on the inside won't matter as much if I know where I'm trying to go and how I'm trying to parent.
Mhm.
So being really clear, what am I really trying to do with this particular kid, and what's my stuff versus what's theirs. And if I want them to be independent and healthy and confident, am I facilitating that experience for them? Am I parenting in that way, or am I just easing my own tensions and own guilt, or fulfilling my own dreams through their life? Or there's a
Mhm.
lot of different things that could drive that, versus like let them be them and facilitate their experience without letting our emotions like run over and do all these weird things.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Do we have any more hows on the for our parents parenting out of guilt?
Well, set that intention
Right.
and do make adjustments if you feel like you could be doing a better job of showing up and connecting with them. Like obviously review your work schedule, your lifestyle. You want to optimize your ability to show up and be the parent you want to be logistically. Sometimes there are those limits or those circumstances. And when that's the case, then say, I'm going on this trip or I missed your thing or I have this thing with a friend. I don't want you to think it's because I don't care about you.
Mhm.
I care about you a ton. I don't like missing your stuff. But I also know that it's important that I care for myself too. And this is a really fun thing for me. I don't want you to think it's going to be a habit that I'm always going to miss your stuff. So those intentional words, that's not something you say to a 3-year old, obviously, but 7, 8, 9, definitely when they're preteen and teen, you say those things often so that there's no confusion. Like you can't say that. I guess you could say it too often, but say it enough to where they really would say, I know my dad or I know my mom cares about me and wants to be at my events, and sometimes they have other plans.
Yeah.
But I think that key is communicate what your intentions are and acknowledge the gap between how it went and how you would like it to go. But don't, and like you said, don't go make some promise you can't uphold. I'll never miss another game. That's stupid.
Right.
You can't control that. I don't like to miss your games. I would like to go to them all the time. I'm not always going to be able to go, and I hope that you don't conclude or come away thinking I don't care about you or don't want to be there. I'm going to miss some, and I'll try to be communicative about that. But I love going to those. Then you've addressed it. You've like kind of given yourself like a healthy pass to like have a balanced life and communicate to your child how important their stuff is to you.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, I just made a note of that as well. The staying away from false promises. Uh so there we go, pretty good parents. Quick breakdown on the parenting out of guilt, right? So um basically kind of, that's driving if guilt is driving your parenting, right? This is kind of what we're talking about. And so sort of some of the whys of that is parents that travel a lot, right? Maybe parents that have to sort of spend more attention for certain kids that could be special needs kids, the disabilities, sports, other things could go in there where you feel like there's an unbalance of
Yeah.
time. Um, and this can likely make more spoiled kids and and then something about with the having your guilt can feel like they deserve more just because you're guilty, right? So those are some of the whys. Some of the hows I had, Josh, was just let them know that you love them, but that life doesn't always, basically resolve around them, right?
Yep.
Which I think having that sort of upfront communication and just knowing like that's the way the world works, right? You talked a lot about intentionality and sentiment, which I think too, and that kind of goes back to us being grounded to being intentful as a parent, right? Or like, what are our intentions as a parent, and keeping that as our north star, right? And then also you said about like acknowledging, so um, that especially if you had some a kid with special needs, let them know, hey, that's just the way it is. They actually need more assistance and time, energy, resources, and just being able to have that honest conversation up front. Um, and then as sort of one of the last ones I put, just stay away from those false promises. They're gonna kind of go nowhere, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And I just thought of this, and it's a huge subject, but um, parental guilt and more coined more appropriately, mom guilt, um, actually leads to I would say worse parenting because the parent doesn't recharge as well as they could
mm,
because their guilt keeps them doing all these kid things and running on a low tank of gas versus regularly doing this just overall healthy thing for them, the full person, which then allows them to be the best mom in this case they can be. And this goes out to like a lot of moms, not all moms, but the mom guilt can be comparative to your friends who looks like they're just able to balance it all, and you feel like you have to compete with that or keep up with them, or your mom was able to do all these things for you, and that's the benchmark that you're going off of. uh, you can't parent like that. You need to know who you are and what's good for you and your family and be a balanced person. And you're balanced by probably having some friends and doing some alone things or recharging in ways away from your kids. That is for your kids.
Mhm.
Like if you show up as a better person, you're being a really good parent versus people looking at them like they're just two different lanes. And you can't be a good parent and go do a fun thing with your friend. All I would say is like that's just a belief that you can't prove. I'd prove how it's all happening in the same person within the same skin. And if you're going to go take care of yourself and you care about your kids and you're going to prioritize them, going and having a night away by yourself or with friends or a long weekend or with your partner is good for your kids because you come back refreshed, more creative, more patient, and you bring more to the parenting relationship. So again, going back to, are you doing something out of guilt? And if so, is it objective? Can it be, uh, evaluated and changed, or is it subjective, unfair? And if so, then you have to practice recognizing it and saying, I have a tendency to have guilt. I know that's not healthy, and I have to practice prioritizing these other things or these other relationships so I can be a better parent. Um, in order to change these behaviors, it starts with the awareness and it starts with kind of accepting kinds of language. I have a tendency, I am experiencing, I've noticed that thought, but what I'm working on, and then enters into the change statement. I'm working on not feeling bad when I'm caring for myself because I know if I care for myself, I have more to offer my family.
Mhm.
I know I'm working on not feeling guilty when I miss my child's event because that guilt is inevitably going to spill over on someone else. And I don't want that. I need to own it. And then if I can change it, I'll change it. If not, I need to just go and say, I'm sorry and make sure they know how it affected me. But that it's crazy how much guilt can just influence human overall behavior and especially parents and not see how that perpetuates into the next generation because they end up parenting the same way.
Right.
So I know I added another big topic
Well,
there,
I
but
think I think you
just
nailed it on the head, and what would be another cure for mom guilt?
well, to see the best mom is is the healthiest person.
Would you say that she should take care of el numero uno first? Is that what you're trying to say?
You got it worked in
There
again.
it is. We worked it in one
You
more
have like
time.
your own little contest. How
Yeah,
many
we
times
worked
you
it in
get?
one more time.
Yes.
But it's so
It
true, and well, and I think we talked about this on this show, but, earlier about the mom, we talked about the quadrant system and
yeah.
how, you get 4 hours a weekend for yourself, both the mom and the dad, and they do, 4 hours with the kids, 4 hours with friends and family, and she was like, "What in the world am I gonna do for myself for 4 hours?" Because she never in her life ever gone and done anything,
Yeah. Right.
like whether it was a run or get away or go read a book or, go do something she's just constantly, kids, 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 kids all the time. And I was
Yeah.
like,
It's unnecessary for the kids. No
mhm.
kid needs that from the mom or the dad. In fact, I'd say they'd be better off having a little bit of independence and downtime to figure it
Our
out on
kids love it and are so happy for us if we have a date night, which we're horrible about
their own.
doing. We always prioritize them and then they get deprioritized. But the kids are ecstatic. They're like, awesome, mom, dad, we have so much fun. We'll be
Yeah,
here.
they don't
They love it.
need us and
Yeah.
or even always like us to be
Yeah.
around all the time. Think of so the mom centering question is what's it look like for me to be the healthiest person? Because if I'm the healthiest person, I'm more likely to be the healthiest mom.
Hmm.
And guilt is just a interfering concept that like gets in the way of being the best person, the best mom.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's awesome. Well, good stuff as always, Joshua. Thank you for the words of wisdom and pretty good parents out there.
Yeah,
We're all going to feel guilty sometimes. Let's stick to our parenting intentions
yeah.
and be pretty good parents, huh?
And all the maps out there. Don't feel guilty. That you have a confusing name and that it
Yeah.
just doesn't make any
Yeah, to bring it
sense.
back too, huh? I like that. Yeah, that's good. All right, well, hey, be kind and take care of el numero uno, be guilt-free, and be pretty good parents.
Yeah.
And we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks, guys.